please rise and honor our nation's flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Ms. Rostikowicz?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Conway?
Yeah.
Mr. Gignac?
Here.
Mr. Leary?
Here.
Ms. Martin?
Here.
Mayor Murphy?
Here.
7 present.
Thank you. We have approval of the minutes of the regularly scheduled meeting of Wednesday, October 17th, 2012. Motion to accept and place on file by Mr. Gignac, seconded by Mr. Conway. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have permission to enter. Permission to enter for November 7th, 2012. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Verbatim Solutions LLC for $17,750 to provide translation services for the elementary, middle, and Lowell High School student handbooks. Funding will be provided by the FY13 Student Support Services Contracted Services Budget. To George Sagai, PhD, for $6,225 to provide professional development services to support the implementation of the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports Framework to administrators and staff in 4 schools and the Freshman Academy. Funding provided by the Race to the Top grant. To Brandy M. Simonson Gaines for $6,225 to provide professional development services to support the implementation of the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports Framework to administrators and staff in 4 schools and the Freshman Academy. Funding provided by the Race to the Top grant. To Susanna Everett for $6,225 to provide professional development services to support the implementation of the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports Framework to administrators and staff in 4 schools in the Freshman Academy. To Diane Myers for $6,225 to provide professional development and support staff in Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports Framework to administrators and staff in 4 schools in the Freshman Academy. To the Corporate Design Insurance for $16,000 to provide student and athletic accident insurance coverage to students with extended coverage for physical education classes, field trips, overnight included, and any school-sponsored activity or clubs. Funding provided by the FY13 Student Accident Insurance. To the Tsonga Center at UMass Lowell for $17,080 to provide for the use of the Tsonga Center, including all necessary backstage areas, dressing rooms, and production areas for the Lowell High School graduation to be held Friday, June 7th, 2013. Funding provided by the Lowell High School budget, school-based allocation. To the E-Rate Exchange LLC for $14,500 to provide planning, management, and administration of the E-Rate application process for Priority 1 and Priority 2 services for the upcoming funding year 2013. Funding provided by the FY13 Budget Technology Contracted Services.
Thank you. Mr. Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the superintendent. The item on Lowell High School graduation is $17,080. I think that, if I recall, we discussed this on the floor a while ago and talked about the fact of sitting down with the university and see if there could be something done with the cost of this service. Because I think that if you take a look at over the past few years, and I'm sure that Mr. Lang would have those numbers, but it's amazing how it has increased substantially in the last 4 or 5 years. You know, I haven't been gone that long from the high school, but if I recall, it's been around $5,000 or $6,000 it was costing us, and now it's $17,000. You know, I don't think that people's paychecks inflated like that. And I'm just wondering, did we contact the university in regards to this? And if so, what was their response? I mean, after all, this is a facility within our own city, and if anything, we're talking about a strong partnerships with which they are. I would certainly hope that they would have, you know, extended their their arms to help us out in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Truthfully, I remember this being since less than $10,000 for a number of years. I do not know if an inquiry happened at Lowell High School. I just read this evening, but I will check into to see if anything had been spoken about as far as this rate. I did not know that had risen so much, so I will check with the headmaster and the planning piece at Lowell High School and get back to you on that.
I'm sure, just to follow up, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure that, obviously, this is something that needless to say, we have to vote on. I mean, we're not going to hold up graduation because of $17,000. But the fact is, I think going forward, I think we need to sit down with the university and see if we can come up with something that is perhaps more reasonable as far as costs are concerned, because after all, we're all trying to save as much money as possible, and with the budget and money as tight as we can, I would think that they would perhaps help us out in this area. Thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Ms. Ross-Sikowicz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are just a couple of items here that, let's see, Dr. Sugai, Brandy, Simmons and Gaines, Susanna Everett, Diane Myers, for identical costs for 4 identical services. So what 4 schools are receiving?
The schools that were receiving the positive behavior intervention supports frameworks, and I'm going to ask Ms. Murphy if I don't have them right, are the Butler, the Bartlett Community, the Lincoln School, the Freshman Academy, and the Robinson Schools. And so in the work of the state most recently, they've been looking a lot about Massachusetts tiered systems of support. That means supporting children, of course, academically, but mixing in the behavior systems to really support children too. So this is an initiative that has been, it's kind of an outsourced thing that this particular agency has had great success in working with populations of children to make sure both professional development's gone for teachers, to look at expectations for young people, expectations behaviorally and academically to frame them. So it's a program that came to our attention and that has been really very well received. It's from University of Connecticut is Dr. Sagai, and these are all people. So in this proposal, it is so varied because each one would have a contact in the schools, and the school principals met Dr. Sagai and were interested in this program as a result of some training we had done, and they thought it would be a core improvement piece for their school. So I can ask if you have any other questions or if Mrs. Murphy wants to go into more detail, but that's the program that evolved to get into how does behavior and outcomes interweave with the curriculum in a way that's really positive. So it's really building positive behavioral systems from the whole child perspective, and it's really not new in education, but it's really taking those barriers that we try and do and put that child need in the center. So social services, academic services, tying them together in the way that's meaningful. And the data from the districts that Dr. Sagai has represented, and he's national, actually international, have been very promising. So that was the interest from that perspective. And like I said, if anybody has any additional questions, Mrs. Murphy would have more detail.
Ms. Cott.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the superintendent. I certainly understand the reasoning why you're having it. I guess we were trying to figure out, was that the maximum capacity for the 4 schools that could be part of the program, or how were they chosen?
Ms. Murphy.
During summer leadership, Dr. Sugai came up and presented the framework for the PBIS model. And we had gotten in touch with him after hearing him speak at the state conference, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. He has been working with around this through the MTSS, as the superintendent said. We really looked at which schools could get the buy-in, because we need to have teachers who really want to be part of this program, because it's about changing the culture in the school and really looking at at positive behavioral supports and not sort of moving away from the punitive, looking at why kids behave the way they do, how do we reinforce positive behaviors, how do we set those systems up. And after Dr. Sugai presented at leadership during the summer, several principals expressed some interest in moving forward. He agreed with his team from the University of Connecticut to come up and work on a pilot project with us for 5 schools. And so we looked at the schools that we felt would really have the buy-in, the schools that we felt culturally were in need of making some changes. We looked at the scores of the students at those schools, the levels they were at, and we chose 1 elementary, 2 middle schools, 1 K-8, and then we added in the freshman academy.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Excuse me, I need a motion. Motion approved by Ms. Martin, seconded by Mr. Leary. Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross-Sikowicz,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Conway,
Yes.
Mr. Gignac,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Martin,
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Thank you. Next, we have memorials for Valwyn Gaudette and Daly Middle School paraprofessional. If you'd please rise in a moment of silence, darken chambers. Next, we have motions. Motion by James Leary, request the superintendent initiate a discussion and begin to develop an educational cooperation plan with the current and future Lowell Public Charter Schools, which will serve the needs of all Lowell Public School students. Seconded by Mr. Gignac. Mr. Leary.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a timely motion because the charter schools in Lowell are our competitors, but they're also serving the same students in the city of Lowell. And I think as we go forward in honest competition with different charter schools, we do need to open up a dialogue where there are issues such as busing and other professional development and needs students that we need to work together on. I think it's a good time to begin that dialogue and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by James Leary, request the superintendent to reopen the discussion with the Lowell Plan, Friends of the Lowell High School administrative and facility staff, University of Massachusetts, Middlesex Community College, City Administration, and other community parties as it relates to the future facility and budget needs of the Lowell High School. The discussion would include, but not be limited to, updating science laboratories, classroom technology, and future student educational facility needs. Seconded by Ms. Martin. Mr. Leary.
Thank you. When I first got on the committee, we had the Lowell Plan begin a discussion in terms of the future facility of the Lowell High School. And I think at this point, as we get into the area of science lab technology and the costs that are associated with that, and working with our partners that have already been named, but other partners like the state delegation as well, this is a good point that when we look at the facility, we get all the resources possible. The science labs alone need to be updated. There's other areas that are likely that need to be updated, but having a good discussion with our partners in downtown and how to do that in the most expedited manner and in a way to do it to save the taxpayers' cost. I think it's a good time to bring in those same parties again and begin that discussion. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, I mean, we were given, a couple more years until we got to the accreditation process, and we, in my mind, in all of our minds, it should be forefront that we need to have a plan in place. I do know that DPD had done an assessment of the high school back in 2007. Might it be prudent of us to perhaps ask for an update from them. I mean, we really need to start this discussion now. I don't want to be 2 years down the road where, you know, we're put on probation because we don't have a plan in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share, with Mr. Leary and the committee, that today I had a meeting with Roger Morneau, the department chair at Lowell High School, as well as Doug Prime, Assistant Superintendent Claire Abrams, and the technology team, to really start looking at what does it take for us to outfit labs appropriately to be ready. You know, this has been a district, we've been talking about this for quite a bit, and it's been mentioned in this administration more than once, that we have been in the business of cutting budgets for such a long time that reality-wise, we don't even know what we need. We know what we need, but we don't know the cost of that. So I'm trying to develop a view of what it takes for us to build up. And so they're going to begin with a plan for building labs, and it will go morph into this kind of group, but I wanted internally to be a plan to say, what does it take to have a state-of-the-art biology lab? We did have the walkthrough with the Massachusetts Business Authority, and they did have grants that we did not have, we were not in that group, but they will be coming forward with a plan. Whether we get those labs or not, these young people, you know, with funding, these young people can't wait for that. So I'm just trying to get a price tag of what does a biology lab cost? What does it cost for that physics education? What's the virtual piece? Just alone, just if we talk off the top of our heads what we shared today at our internal meeting, just having stayed tables there and not movable furniture is one of the biggest pieces, making it the center, making the technology right in the middle, a smart bulb at the end. It's just really interesting. So we're beginning those conversations. It's not that we're going to have millions and millions of dollars in excess, but I think it's really prudent and important for this committee to know and the city to know what we have to prepare this generation of young people for the next step. So we're working on that at the basic level, but I will morph into including these partners for the insight we need. Thank you.
Just quickly, I agree with what you're saying, but as long as we're tying in the entire community, because there might be ways of reaching funds we didn't expect and other opportunities that we might not be aware of. So I'm glad that, you know, we can tie in UMass Lowell and all the other partners into doing this, and I know with using everyone's resources we'll be very successful. Thank you.
Mr. Gignac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to echo a few of the comments that have been made so far. The fact that we were unable to get go further funds from the Mass School Building Authority in regards to updating our science labs is unfortunate, and it's unfortunate that the high school didn't go after that during the appropriate period, and it looks like we're kind of a little behind. But the fact of the matter is, our students are at a huge disadvantage because they don't have the appropriate laboratories that they need. And I think this motion is a great idea to reach out to our partners to see how they can help us, because no one knows science labs better than the university and Middlesex and the other partners. So I think this is a right step in the good step in the right direction, and I look forward to seeing your report. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have subcommittees. Facility Subcommittee, approval of the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, October 17th, 2012.
Mayor, just to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Leary, seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have the Finance Subcommittee, approval of the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, October 17th, 2012.
Mayor, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve by Mr. Leary, seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have the Personnel Subcommittee, report and approval of the minutes of meeting of Monday, October 22nd, 2012. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Reporting on this meeting, which did take place on Monday, October 22nd, present from the Personnel Subcommittee were myself and Ms. Scott. Also present from the School Committee were Mr. Gignac and Ms. Rosikowitz. From the School Department, we were joined by Superintendent Franco and Deputy Superintendent Lang. We had one item of discussion at this meeting, and it was to address a motion that had been made by my colleague, Ms. Scott, for the School Committee as an entity to come up with its own set of goals and expectations, specifically to be in line with our next budget season and our next set of budget deliberations. I think we talked a great deal, and we were presented with some information from the superintendent about her process and her goal setting that this committee has reviewed as part of our regular personnel subcommittee activities. But I think the interpretation of Ms. Scott's motion really was that this is meant to be a conversation with the committee itself to set our own goals and priorities for district-wide initiatives. One of the key things I think that we came out with was the idea that we're looking at each school committee member having coming up with 2 or 3 different goals that they have for our district, and then the committee itself being able to work together to finalize and prioritize within that. I think it's the first time this committee's kind of taken on the opportunity to talk amongst ourselves on these kinds of topics, and I think it's a great idea for us to be able to kind of do some soul searching on our own, and then be able to come together and discuss what we want to see as our priorities for the district prior to entering into our budgetary conversations. So that it was approved by the subcommittee. I'd put it forth to the full school committee for their approval, with the expectation that if approved, we would be looking at a timeframe of hoping to get goals in place by the end of this year, and then being able to schedule a time, probably in January, February, for the committee to have a meeting to discuss and prioritize. I'd make that in the form of a very long-winded motion.
Motion by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Rosikowicz. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Motion to accept as report of progress by Mr. Gignac, seconded by Mr. Leary. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have the Personnel Subcommittee. Report of the meeting of Wednesday, November 7th, 2012. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. The Personnel Subcommittee did meet earlier this evening. Present from the subcommittee were myself, Ms. Scott, and Mr. Conway. We're also joined by the rest of our colleagues here on the school committee. We basically had 2 topics to discuss at this meeting. The first was a recommendation from the administration that we create a new part-time, I would call it temporary position, that would allow us to bring somebody on board. They would be working it's a very unique situation where we'd want to be bringing someone on who could monitor our heating systems throughout the district. It would be a start time every day at 4 a.m., and the shift would run until 7. It's a very limited, 7 a.m. It's basically a 3-hour shift. And this person would be the first person in, be able to do the computer monitoring of all of our schools. It actually gives the system that's in place now, would give us the opportunity to be able to drill down and be able to, this person would be able to review temperatures in individual classrooms. So they'd be able to have a very full, comprehensive view of what's going on in the schools. And it would allow us the time in the mornings when there is an issue, with a boiler, with, if something went out overnight, or, any of those kinds of problems which happen happen frequently in a district like ours, where we do have some older equipment that we rely on. It would allow us to be able to get that information earlier and be able to dispatch the appropriate repair personnel, so that by the time students and staff were arriving at our school sites, we will have been able to have already corrected the problem. And I think that's one of the key things, is understanding that, A, these situations do happen with some frequency. And the reality is that when you have young children coming into school sites, if the heat's been off overnight, it's a very uncomfortable and inappropriate environment for young kids to be coming into. So this position, again, running from October basically and through April, There was some conversations around the appropriate hourly wage that would be put in place with this. So I would submit to the committee as a whole a motion to approve the administration's request to create this position as a EMS Energy Management Systems Monitor at an hourly rate, which was approved by the subcommittee and would have to be approved by the full committee of a range of between $15 to $25 per hour. And we have attached the sample job description, which would include the basic monitoring that this person would be doing, the troubleshooting they'd be responsible for, and in some situations, there would be other duties as assigned by the supervisor. I'd submit that to the full committee for their approval as a new position to be created.
Motion by Ms. Martin to approve the position as stated, seconded by Mr. Leary. Any discussion? Ms. Scott? Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross-Sikowicz?
No.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
6 yeas, 1 nay, passes.
Ms. Martin?
Oh, I'm sorry. As a follow-up motion, I'd like to move that we transfer the necessary funding. I'm looking at, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Lang, $11,375, is that correct? As an amount to be transferred from the school committee suspense account to cover the costs of this newly created position.
Motion by Ms. Martin to transfer $11,300 from the suspense account for the purposes of this position, seconded by Ms. Scott. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross-Sikowicz?
No.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
6 yeas, 1 nay, passes.
The second topic at our Personnel Subcommittee was a recommendation from the administration to add a custodial position to the Rogers School site. At this point, unlike all of the other schools in our district, the Rogers has been functioning with only 2 custodial staff. This year, we made a pretty dramatic change to the school building. It went from being exclusively, well, there were some students that were in place there, preschool students, but we added over 100 new students to that school site in this last year with the creation of a new kindergarten cluster that we placed at the Rogers School. With the influx of that many students, it's become apparent that we need to bring that school up to a full complement of custodians. So we'd be able to bring that to the traditional 3 that we see at all of our other schools, and this would be adding 1 full-time custodian to the complement at the Rogers School, and I'd make that in the form, I'm sorry, a junior custodian at the Rogers School, and I'd make that in the form of a motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Martin to add a 3rd custodian to the Rogers School, seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. Any discussion? Mr. Conway?
Just very quickly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the superintendent, do we have any custodians that have been laid off that are still out of work at this particular point?
I'm not sure. I'll ask Mr. Lang if he knows.
No, not to my knowledge. We have a few that are out on workers' comp, but we don't have anyone like from the past.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in the last few budgets, and it's very difficult, I think, to keep track of because there were so many cuts over the last few years, and I'm just wondering if there are any that are still, excuse me, laid off.
Not to my knowledge.
And if there were, obviously, they would get first rights back.
Yeah, if it was a permanent person that we had to lay off,
Right.
and we have temporary people that cover like shifts once in a while for like workers' comp type cases, but those people aren't, I don't know if they're not considered permanent, but no, when we did the layoffs a few years back, I believe at this point all those people have been called back.
Okay.
I'll confirm for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross-Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much. One final motion from our meeting. This would be a motion to transfer $35,000 from the school committee suspense account to cover the costs of the junior custodian position we just created.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Martin to transfer $35,000 from the suspense account, seconded by Ms. Ross Sikowicz. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Conway,
Yes.
Mr. Gignac,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Martin,
Yes,
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Ms. Martin?
that's the conclusion of our meeting notes, and I'd submit that as a report of progress.
Thank you. Motion to accept and place on file by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Ross Sikowicz. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have the Facilities Subcommittee. Report of the meeting of Wednesday, November 7th, 2012. Mr. Leary.
Thank you. The agenda was called at 6 o'clock. In attendance were the entire Facilities Subcommittee and the superintendent, the assistant superintendent of finance. The initial topic is regarding the doors at the high school and the bid that came in. In the city capital plan, the city budgeted by approximately $325,000 for replacement doors at the high school. This is part of the overall administrative's capital plan. There were 12 vendors that actually put in for a bid, and after going through the whole list, only 2 actually submitted a bid. The range was at the high end $790,000, and at the low end $575,000. Upon reviewing the bid, the lower bid company actually withdrew their bid because they believed they didn't actually look at the entire product when they put the bid in. So at this point, because the range is so significantly higher than where the city capital plan budget is, we're going back to take a look at the overall project. And I can have Mr. Lang expand upon it a little bit more, but essentially, we're taking a look at 3 other vendors that are going to come in and take a look at it that we've done business with in terms of the city, as well as UMass Lowell and Middlesex Community College. Also take a look in terms of putting in some type of technology for access keys, putting that technology in now as opposed to waiting at a later date to do that. And that this is not only in terms of overall cost, but it's also looking at the safety for the high school. And I believe also the Robinson Middle School was part of this project. So this was more of a point of information. The subcommittee did not take any action at this point in time. What the administration presented is that at our first meeting in December, on December 5th, we will have specific action at that point in funding resources. The subcommittee was interested in finding other methods besides just within the budget in terms of grants, potential safety grants, other capital issues within the city that didn't expend their full budget in an effort to try to make up any costs that are over the $325,000 cost. Anticipating this beginning in December, what the administration believes is that we'll probably have this completed in February or March of 2013. So we'll push this back a little bit more than we had anticipated. Some of the questions from the subcommittee inquired if it would be more cost-effective to wait until the summer. But in terms of, as the administration explained, in terms of what we're dealing with and some of the doors and the number of doors at the high school and some of them that are in desperate need of replacing, that this is a critical need. So we're working, the administration is working with the city, and in addition, our safety subcommittee folks, which include UMass Lowell, Middlesex Community College, and Lowell General, in terms of how to go about doing this in a way that'll be effective and hopefully cost savings involved. So I'd make that as, I know Mr. Lang wants to expand upon that, or the other members have any questions, but I want to put that as a motion as report of progress. We're looking for more information at our December 5th meeting.
Thank you. Motion to accept as report of progress by Mr. Leary, seconded by Mr. Gignac. Any discussion on the report? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have
But
report.
there was a second topic, too, that was brought up under the subcommittee. It was just, sorry about that, there was an issue that's been ongoing for quite some time, and that reflects the front entrance of Lowell High School, the main entrance of Lowell High School, and the disrepair and the potential safety and liability issues. The subcommittee discussed this with the administration at length in terms of how to addressing this with the city. The city has made an attempt to try to repair it, but it is going to become more involved than just an initial patchwork. What the subcommittee would like to present to the full committee is the following motion in terms of asking the city administration to actually repair the entire front entrance, the cement entrance, at Lowell High School in an expedited manner in an effort to save, potential injuries and what have you. So what the motion reads that the subcommittee is requesting, and I'll make this in a form of a motion, the motion is to request the school committee as a whole send a letter to the city manager requesting that the front cement entrance be replaced as it is falling into disrepair and presents serious safety and liability issues. So I make that as in a form of a motion.
Motion by Mr. Leary, seconded by Ms. Rossignol. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Mr. Leary.
And that's, right now, is a report of progress for the meeting. Thank you, Mayor, as a motion.
Motion to accept the other portion of the report is a report of progress by Mr. Leary, seconded by Ms. Rossignol. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have reports of the superintendent. Superintendent's Parent Advisory Board. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make you all aware of a meeting that I'm holding tomorrow evening with parent representatives from each one of our buildings. I've invited, at the suggestion of principals, parents from every building, and 15 from Lowell High School, representing the high school. And so I have slated for more than 20 people that are coming tomorrow. And really, the goal of this meeting is to really serve as an advisory board to me, to just really look at what parents are thinking about what we need to do to work as the best team, and what, in fact, they hope we provide for them as parents as far as education, for children as far as support, and in essence, when they look at all these initiatives that go on, what clarity we can provide to them as a group. So I just wanted to make everybody aware that that meeting is going to take place in the basement room 054 Rogers School, and we've gotten some very nice RSVPs, so I'm looking forward to it. So anybody's more than welcome, but that's what we're doing. So starting this group up, and I hope to meet with them at least quarterly, and using their input to provide more input to us as a group of people who lead the schools in the system. So just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you. Any discussion on the report? Ms. Rossignol.
I just have a quick question, because I'm sure this will come up. How were the parents chosen to participate?
I asked principals to look at parents who would represent the populations in their school buildings. So I asked for 2 parents who have been involved in different capacities in the building. So I did get probably by, 100 recommendations. And so I do have representatives from each level, probably, like I said, 25, and 15 were represented from Lowell High. I asked for different cohorts to be invited from the group, and so we sent written invitations to everybody, and people have been in touch to respond. So that's how they were chosen. And to be honest with you, I hope after meeting initially that we kind of break it down to elementary, middle, and high school, and sometimes we have some vertical meetings also, but to really look at what parents are very concerned about. In general, we hear from a number of parents, but we don't hear directly. We hear, usually when it's not the best. I'm more than willing to hear about the good and the bad and the ugly for us to be the best school system we can be, but it's just a way for me to put faces of parents with the issues that we have, and I think it's better for us as a group. So that's how they were chosen.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this report? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Could we have a motion first? Motion to approve by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Rossignol. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have the National Institute of School Leadership Video Opportunity. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, I'm asking for the support of the committee on an initiative that came to my attention. As a district, we have been requested to participate in a national video opportunity. As members of the committee who have been tenured people here, you've heard of the acronym NISL. It's National Institute for School Leadership. Probably about 6 years ago, the state of Massachusetts was thinking about it being the training initiative for all principals, and at that time, we bought into being trained NISL trainers. As a matter of fact, I'm a trainer myself, and we trained every administrator that came into the system. So they worked with Lowell. At this particular point, they're reviewing the '06 videos and packages to get them up to speed. They're very interested in coming filming some of our classrooms to demonstrate nationally the work of Lowell in the National Institute of School Leadership portfolio. And so what I'm asking for is permission for video, of course, following all the regulations that we would follow with permission specifically for parents to know about it. But they're interested in getting excellent teaching in an urban setting. So they approached me. I will tell you that I haven't talked to the director, national director, because I will get something back in return. However, at this particular point, I'm complimented that nationally Lowell teachers and lessons will be featured if it is your desire to go forward.
Thank you. Any discussion on this report? May I have a motion to accept and place in file by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Rosikowicz. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have Gateway Cities update. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, we have, as a Gateway City, been involved in planning for the funding that was included in the governor's budget this particular year. After deliberation this year, Mayor Murphy and I have been involved in the meetings that go along with this whole initiative. The state decided on 2 different funding areas. One was the education of English language learners, because of course, as you all know, there's such an immense change in the program delivery for those young people. And also to look at career ed and that whole option, and that's more of a planning grant. And Ms. Murphy's going to speak a little bit more about that when we present her report. However, the larger grant was for the outside amount of $350,000. So the state of Massachusetts wanted it to be a really interactive summer activity for newcomers to the city. And so we have proposed a summer school that goes along with the summer school we normally arrange for, but it would be a longer day, and there would be field trips involved, so the experiential learning piece would be part of it. So that's the proposal that was submitted last week, along with the Career Ed initiative. So I just wanted to make you all aware that was what the state had requested that districts comply with, and we did submit that proposal.
Thank you. Any discussion on this report? Entertain a motion to accept as and place on file by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Scott. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have response to motion of September 19th, 2012 by David Conway. Ask the superintendent to prepare a monthly report that will list any overtime or extra pay expenditures given to school employees for the performance of their duties within their individual job title description. As Mr. Conway was absent from 2 meetings, we also have an identical agenda item number 21. I'd entertain a motion to accept to take the 2 together by Ms. Martin, seconded by Mr. Leary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Mr. Conway.
Thank you. I first of all, I want to thank the superintendent in our office for putting together this report. I think it's extremely important that we take a look at how we're spending our money, especially again during difficult economic times, and of course we've been saying that year after year. And I think it's also important to track where that money is going so that we can evaluate particular jobs to find out whether we have to add additional support or somehow to make certain types of adjustments. I would like to take a look at the, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the superintendent, or perhaps the deputy superintendent. If we take a look at the September report, I have a few questions on that, just to clarify some things. On page, I believe, page 2. Just for, I think for confidentiality, I'd like to refer to each item as the number next to it. For example, number 20, without coming out with specific titles of the names and so forth. I noticed that, I'm looking at this as being overtime, and I see that the number of hours is 40, and the cost is $1,616 and change. Now, what is that actually? Is that a full-time job? Is that someone, I don't quite understand why it would be 40 hours of overtime.
Madam Superintendent?
I don't know if it's a per diem rate, Mr. Conway. I'll ask Mr. Lang if he knows in this particular case.
Thank you.
Again, any of these that you want to give me, I can dig deeper into, but, I mean, it definitely is an overtime rate, so it would be like a time and a half rate, but it would be 40 cumulative hours in the month of September. So it's not like 40 hours in 1 week. This would be 40 hours over the course of the whole month. It could be 10 per week. It could have been with the start of school. This person could have been doing, it's an outreach person, could have been doing extra outreach right at the very beginning of the school year. Without digging into the individual timesheets, this is just a cumulative report for the month.
Right.
But it looks like it's a number of hours at an hourly rate, an hour and a half rate.
Yeah, there's a few of these things, when the public takes a look at them, needless to say, they're wondering, and again, I'm looking at it, and this certainly isn't my area of expertise, but there's certain things that just pop out. And I think it's, we're obviously obligated, we're spending the taxpayers' money, we're obligated to ask these questions to find out where this money is going. When I see 40 hours, whether it's overtime or not, I see $1,600. That's a lot of money. That's quite a bit of money. Now, there's a few more. For example, on page 3, number 28, this caught my attention. And again, I'm not going to go over all of these, but I just want to put a sample out here, just to get an idea that maybe when we come up with the report next time, that we have to take a look at some of these things. For example, number 28, it's got number of hours up in the top, 4, and the cost is $1,332.96. It's a lot of money. I would imagine people listening to this right now would like to work those 4 hours for $1,300. I know I would.
For that particular person. It does say hours at the top of the report. The report comes right from Unis, the financial system. It really could say units instead. That 4 would actually be 4 days for that particular, no one's paid that hourly rate, so it's 4 days, and that would be someone's per diem rate. They must have worked extra hours, again, prior to the, extra days prior to the start of the school year. I'm not familiar with who that person is, but I can tell you that's not the hourly rate, that's the number of days.
I understand that, but again, when we put a report out, it's public information, and when they look at this, they're going to question it. I mean, if somebody sees this and whether the press takes a look and says, why are you spending $1,300 on what it says right up in the top from the report, number of hours, 4 hours, I don't have an answer. I really don't. But I think that what we need to do is we need to, to make sure that we cover this as carefully as possible. If you turn to page 8 for a minute, again, it's something very similar up towards the top, and there has to be an explanation for it, but I'm just bringing out some examples. There's 4 hours, 6 hours, and 6 hours, and so forth, with almost $1,000, which I think that...
Can I just ask what
Sure.
number? What number does it correspond to?
I'm sorry, it's number, I believe, 79, 80, and 81. And that's on page 8.
Right.
And again, I think that, again, I don't want to be redundant here, but I think we have to clear that up. And what really popped out, and this is the job that I would like, is the one on page 17, where it has 1 hour for $426. So again, we have to let the public know how we're spending the money, and I think that's extremely important that we take a look at those. I'm wondering whether when we do these reports, whether you could export this information onto a spreadsheet so that we can, I think we can merge the data on each month so that we can then track specific jobs, or I should say specific titles, and see how much money is being spent on that, whether it is a 1-month thing or whether it's something that it's repetitious each month. And if it is, I think it's something that we have to examine and take a look at and find out, how do we fix it, how do we change it, what type of move do we have to make to make this more effective. On the report on October, just to point out a couple things here, I think on page 4. On page 4, number 34. Are you following me on that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get there.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
Yep.
We have 25 hours, if I recall, this is a person that just came on board, and all of a sudden, we're given 25 hours of overtime for over $1,000.
That would be an hourly rate.
Sorry?
That would be an hourly rate.
That's in addition to his regular pay?
Yes, it would have been for extra hours worked in addition to his regular job.
Okay, why? That's the point I'm asking, is we have a person that just comes on board, and then all of a sudden, we're giving them 25 hours overtime. I don't quite understand that. And that's why I want to take a look at these monthly reports and how they emerge to make sure that we don't have something like this showing up every month. That's what I want to make sure. Because, in the past, we certainly have seen this, where at the end of the year, we've found people making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 overtime. That just can't happen anymore. So anyways, I think this report, I appreciate the report, but I think it needs to be cleaned up and to make it a little bit clearer to the public. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Leary?
Can you answer Mr. Conway's question, Madam Superintendent? He asked why a specific individual who just came on board actually worked overtime. I guess that's the question. Well, and if we can't do it tonight, could we actually do it at a later date?
Madam Superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In this particular case, and Mr. Lang, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in deployment of all the technology, to get things out in time, a number of different staff people worked to get the job done. And I'm thinking that that's what happened because of the timeliness of us getting the equipment, getting them. We would get the laptops in place for our teachers. We would get the computers in to schools as much as we possibly could in the time allowed. And, people were working day and night to get that accomplished, Mr. Leary. And Mr. Lang, if that's not correct, I would love for you to add to it, but I believe in this particular case, that's what happened, but please correct me if I'm not.
Yeah, the previous people you mentioned earlier, one was a person that did community outreach to families. A couple were teachers, a couple were paras. A lot of this is work that they actually do, say, in after-school programs, in addition to their regular day, things of that sort. The particular last person you did mention is one of the new technology people that's helping with the big technology push. The report itself, again, comes right from the computer. It can be manipulated in any fashion you really want. If you want to track particular people, if you want to track particular positions, if you tell me how you want the report run, we can run it that way at any time, and you can give me the different time frames. This particular report was just responsive. It basically captured about 15 or 20 different pay codes that we use to track different expenditures within the system. And I can run it monthly. In 3 months' time, you can say, can I get a quarterly cumulative? I can do that for the people. I can really do it any way you'd like. But this is actually the data that comes directly from the system.
Well, I appreciate
Mr.
that, but I think what I'm looking at too is that, as I said just a few minutes ago, I want to be able to pick up this report, and I think anybody should be able to pick up the report and understand what that meant. I mean, you just said to me when I said and up on the top of head hour, then you mentioned something about, well, that was probably a day instead. Well, I think the whole idea of probably a day, we don't know if it is a day or not, and that's why all I'm asking for is to make it as clear as possible for the report, so that I can pick that up and I can say to someone, it's 1 unit, well, the 1 unit is actually 80 hours, I have no idea, or 80 days, or whatever it may be, and that's why the cost is $942. But when you take a look and you see that it's an hour and it's $940, well, obviously, we should be asking questions to find that out. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you figure out how to run those reports to make it as clear as possible for us to take a look at them, so we don't have these issues, and that we can go back to the public and we can explain to them what this actually means. That's all I want to try to do, is clear this up to make sure that everybody understands it, number one. And number two, I want to make sure that at the end of the year, we don't find somebody that has $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 overtime, and we should have done something about that before, so that we can catch it when we're doing these things on a monthly basis. That's the way you do business, and as one of my colleagues has often said, that's the real world. Well, we have to live in the real world here. So, anyways, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the report? I'd entertain a motion then to accept and place on file by Ms. Scott, seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. I think this is a good time to welcome Mr. Conway back to the school committee meeting. I think a majority of the school committee
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
missed you. I'm not going to take a roll call on that right now, but I think a majority missed you. Next, we have the response to the motion of, we have personnel report. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is your monthly report informing everybody of our retirements, resignations, and anybody who's been hired for your review.
Any discussion on this report? Entertain a motion to accept and place on file by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz, seconded by Mr. Conway. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have list of eligible teachers. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is the monthly list that states our list of eligible teachers, and the addition that was requested by Mr. Conway within the last couple of months of adding the addresses of all the people on the list are included.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Entertain a motion to accept and place on file by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz, seconded by Ms. Scott. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have home education. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, we have a request from Mr. Vincent Ruiz from Hildreth Street to educate his child. This will make the total number of families of 26 and the total number of children homeschooled to 47.
Thank you. Any discussion on this report? Ms. Ross-Sikowicz.
I just have a quick question about our students whose parents choose to homeschool them. Are we having any kind of dialogue with the families as to why they're making that decision to homeschool their children?
Yes, Ms. Ross-Sikowicz, there's definitely a process, there's an application process. They do call, we have to get a plan of study, we have to give feedback, we have to request progress reports. We follow the letter of the law as much as possible, but in every case, they go through the curriculum office to get approved for this home education, and a packet is provided in that particular case, but there are many conversations that occur, and reasons why. And they vary. There are a cohort of homeschoolers in the city that kind of band together, and that's been the choice that they've made. And then there are others that, throughout the education, for whatever reasons, choose to school their children at home. But we do have many conversations, either through the Office of Student Services or the Curriculum Office, upon that particular piece. We try to do as much as possible to keep the students in school, but again, legally, it comes down to parent choice, but there is intervention for sure.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Entertaining a motion to approve by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Rosikowicz. Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? I'm sorry, Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
7 yeas approved.
Thank you. We have before and after school programs, use of revenue. Madam Superintendent. I didn't skip one. We took the two items together. I did skip one. I stand corrected. Another response to a motion by Mr. James Leary, July 18th, 2012, request the superintendent, in conjunction with the Greater Lowell Technical High School, look into the feasibility of creating a Lowell Public Schools vocational technical alternative school. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a report submitted to me by Assistant Superintendent Ann Murphy, where she talks quite a bit about her meetings of the team with the Workforce Investment Board, Middlesex Community College, on looking at other options for serving at-risk students. The committee came together a few times. I'm going to ask Mrs. Murphy to fill in the details as she has the first line of response.
Thank you. When we looked at the motion, specifically the intent of the motion to take a look at our alternative programs and see how we could infuse a vocational component to it, we started by really taking a look at the students we have in our alternative schools, and at the same time, shortly after this motion came out, the state has come out with the EWIS system, which is the Early Warning Indicator System, so that every student in the Commonwealth now is given a risk designation. And what this system does is take a look at the number of school transitions children have, grade retentions, attendance issues, grade performance, and assigns every student a risk factor. So some students will be low risk, some moderate, some high, some very high. And so we had that information at right about the same time that Mr. Leary's motion came out. And so we looked and said, okay, how are our students in our alternative schools doing? Are they graduating? Aren't they graduating? What happens with those middle school students who are coming out of our alternative schools? At the same time, through the Gateway Cities program, there was a grant application that specifically looked at a career academy. And it's a planning grant. And when we looked at should this planning grant go to the high school to incorporate another academy into the high school, we really felt like we know we have a group of students that we're not meeting their needs. We have a group of students who have been in our vocational schools, our alternative schools, that haven't been successful. And we really needed to look at our alternative schools, what's happening there. So we chose to submit our application for the Gateway Cities grant to look at an entrepreneurial career academy specifically for alternative school students. And we've been working with the Workforce Investment Board, Middlesex Community College, to put this application together. And what we envision is an alternative school that would start with 9th grade students. It would be a real 4-year program, and each year bring in another class. we would look at infusing the curriculum, the Common Core curriculum, with real experiential learning, service learning projects, doing some job shadowing, going out and working in the communities, doing some internships. What does that mean to really be an entrepreneur? How do you get into business? And looking at an innovative way of servicing our alternative school students. So we're in the very early planning stages of this. We're hopeful that we will be one of the 12 applicants approved for the grant, so we can continue planning with this. We did reach out to the Greater Lowell Technical High School because they have been able to continue with an academic component along with the vocational. And so we really want to learn from them how to infuse the two as we hopefully will go forward with this new alternative program. We know that not every program is going to be right for every student. In a city such as Lowell, we need multiple options for kids. So I'm not thinking that this is going to be the one alternative school that's going to be able to service all of our students. But it will be a different approach that will be able to maintain the high academic standards, yet put that service learning, that experiential learning that we just haven't been able to infuse into our alternative schools at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Leary?
Just
Yeah,
first of
Mr.
all,
Conway.
thank you for the hard work in the beginning of the program. I think this is a good base as we go forward. One of the areas when I wrote the motion, and I don't know, I probably should have worded the motion a little different. I think this is very important in where the direction we're going, we need to go in. But I think also what I'd like to look at is students who may not be in the alternative school yet, that for whatever reason don't have the points to get into the Greater Lowell Technical School. But I think this is actually, as I listened to the Assistant Superintendent Murphy explain it, it's actually a good starting point, because these are students who actually need these services, and we're going to start addressing a concern where we can be better with our alternative school. I'd like to see it, if possible, evolve for students who may not be in the alternative school, that may drop out but just not get into the alternative school, who may want that technical education but just can't get into that setting. I know it's a big kind of game to plan, but I think this is a good start. If we can expand that and start looking at that as we talk to the Greater Lowell School. I think they said the waiting list was 300. I don't know if that list means all 300 really desire an alternative a technical school education. They might be a lot less. But I'd like to kind of get an understanding as to what those numbers might be and actually start addressing that as well. But I like the presentation, and I like the work that's starting thus far. If we could expand it to take a look at other folks who might not be in the alternative school. They may end up in the alternative school, actually. I don't know if that's true, but I think if we're not meeting a student's needs, as the Assistant Superintendent just stated, we're trying to look at needs we're not meeting by doing something different. I just want to see if we can incorporate kids who are not in the alternative school yet. Thank you, but I thank you for the report. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Conway, and then Ms. Martin? Excuse me, Ms. Murphy first, and then Mr. Conway.
If I could, I'm sorry if I misspoke. When we looked at the data, we were specifically looking at which of our students were not successful. And we clearly knew that the students from our middle alternative schools were not graduating in the numbers that we wanted. We really do see this alternative school as not being just for those kids coming up from the middle school, but for those real at-risk kids that are maybe over in the freshman academy, or as we hopefully expand it into sophomore, junior, senior year, those kids that are really at risk of not graduating and are not engaged really in their education. So I don't see it just for those kids coming up the middle school, but for all of our kids as we move forward with it.
Thank you. Mr. Conway, and then Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really I applaud all the individuals trying to put this together. I think it's extremely important. When you take a look at the alternative schools, I think these schools certainly try to do the best they possibly can and create an alternative for our students that are falling through the cracks. And we bring them to this alternative site, and in many instances, it still doesn't work. Sometimes we bring them back to let's say back to the high school, and because of quite often the size, the complexity of the system, again, they fall back through the cracks again. And I think this is another alternative, and I think that it's a great partnership that could develop here. And again, I applaud people for putting this forward. I applaud Mr. Leary and Ms. Murphy for working on this, because again, I think there are too many students, and we've all seen them over the years, that just walk out the door eventually, and they walk out and never to come back. And I think this might give them that perhaps another chance to make it work. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My question would be on some of the planning aspects of this. In moving forward with a kind of entrepreneurial-based approach, was there any kind of assessment done? Not to say that there's a typical alternative middle school student. There isn't. I mean, they all have different interests, different, but I would think before we build a school that has that specific a focus, we'd take time to determine if students who are at high risk, if that's the natural career progression for them. If a student who, one of the factors is attendance. If a student is having attendance issues, is their own business, where's the connection between what those risk factors are and their opportunities for success in something so specific? I don't know if that was done as of yet, or if that was information that the partners brought to the table.
We're really at the early planning stages of this, and when I say early, I mean like really early. But we are pretty excited about the possibility of getting some funding through the gateway cities to really explore this and say, okay, what would this really look like for students, and what's really the population of kids that would benefit from this, because we do know that not every program meets every student's needs, and we have to have multiple options for students. We would like to see something where maybe the first year it's for ninth graders, the second year 9th and 10th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, so that we can build the curriculum as we go through. We're not envisioning saying, okay, let's just open another alternative school and put the kids in and see if it flies. Really trying to be thoughtful about what the curriculum is going to look like for students, that academic work, and the partnerships within the communities and the businesses and the population.
And I think I actually really think the idea of building the school literally from the ground up is great. I mean, I think the idea of starting with the ninth grade and then building it, sequentially makes a lot of sense. In recognizing you're early on in the process, I would just offer the suggestion that as you're talking with the partners who know a great deal about, the current labor market, about, all that information that we desperately need, I think getting backed into one specific focus for the school this early on may be a little premature, and we may want to remain open to some other options that may be more productive for this age group. Again, there's no one answer, and I don't think any of us are looking at building this new alternative school as the answer to every student's question. But I think we can look at it as this is a new model where alternative schools are not necessarily punitive, but they are opportunity-driven. And that's a whole different way of looking at alternatives. And the key for those to be successful, I think, are recognizing the demographic and the other things that make up a typical student, in building something that will meet their needs. So that was my just reaction as I was looking at the materials. I think it's a phenomenal idea, and I love the approach of building it this way. I particularly like the idea of having our partners so closely involved from the very beginning. But I do think, I find the topic area a little limiting, and I think before we move forward with that, we really need to have some background information, some assessments of the students, even if we're just trying to get a typical picture of what our 8th grade alternative students look like, have them go through career assessments, have them go through some different aptitude, kind of testing that would give us some kind of a picture so that we could build something that will meet the needs that are right in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this report? Entertain a motion to accept his report of progress by Ms. Scott, seconded by Mr. Leary. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Last report, before and after school programs, the use of revenue. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, this is a report from Deputy Superintendent Lane, where he gets into more detail about the use of revenue from the before and after school programs that are collected in the morning from the programs run by CTI and the YMCA. He talks about the history of that particular process and his work with the city solicitor. I'm going to ask Mr. Lang to speak in more detail about it.
Mr. Lang.
Thank you. You all have the reports. You've had a chance to read it. Basically, the school department for years, and as I indicated in the report, this predates me, has always partnered with local agencies to utilize our buildings for before and after school programs. And there had been a practice in place, for years, where whichever schools hosted the sites, whether they be YMCA, CTI, Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc., there's been different groups that have used them. Instead of actually charging the school the actual user fee and the permit fees and things like that for the space, because Lowell Public School students are benefited by the participation in the programs, in lieu of that user fee or payment, the schools have received a donation, as how it was explained to me in the past, but basically a fee for hosting that program. Currently, and in the past, those fees had always gone to the school student activity fund, and they were able to use it for their own school purpose to benefit their own kids. When we were doing the audits last year of the student activity fund, Ms. Scott had actually just questioned whether the fund should really go directly to the student activity accounts for the schools, or if they should go to the use of facility account, the revolving fund that we have, and then be allocated for the after-school purpose activities or school repair, things like that. I think it's really an issue for the committee, in my personal opinion. It's a philosophical issue, and the functional way of how you get the funds to where you want them is really an afterthought. And we can make it work either way. If the committee really would like to keep the practice of, if a school hosts a before or after school program and partners with a group to do that, and they want that particular school to be able to access the funds to benefit their kids, because basically the school is impacted by having a program in the building. They're not able to, we have to license these programs, so they're not able to use, say, cafeteria or gym space either before or after school because the program is there. Those kids and staff really are impacted by that. If you want to maintain that type of philosophy and whatnot, and which is what I recommend and I lay out in the memo, I lay out the votes for you to take. If alternately you would like to just collect the revenue and leave it in the use of facility fund and use it for general school department facility things, it's within your right to do that as well. I do personally just fear if there is not some incentive for the schools directly impacted by having the programs in their buildings, if they're not seeing some tangible reward almost or incentive for doing that, if the schools are going to be less apt to foster these partnerships if it's not directly benefiting them in some way. Or alternately, obviously we still want to have these programs. Do we then need to start transferring the programs year after year around the district so that no individual school is receiving the revenue from them? I don't want to say burden, but the impact of having them be housed in the building is somewhat shared around the district as well. So for me, it's a philosophical issue, and you can make the accounting of it work how you like after the fact. And it really comes down to, do you feel that the schools that host and partner these programs, should they benefit from the donation or the revenue that is derived from them? And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any discussion on this report? Ms. Scott.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the superintendent. The question I had when I brought it up is what exactly the, contract memorandum of agreement is calling the fee? Is it a facility fee? Is it a donation?
For my purposes, it's always been explained to me, and it's always been thought of as a donation. We have a use of facility policy that the school committee approved, and it basically lays out charges that any group that wants to use a building would have to pay for the use. So it's custodial time, a room fee, things of that sort. Obviously, within that policy, there's discretion given to the superintendent or the superintendent's designee to figure out what is really a workable fee for any group using a building to pay. So we do this on a daily basis with different groups that use the building. You know, they have to carry the insurances and things like that. But if we actually charged these particular community agencies by the letter of the policy what the fees would be, it would be cost prohibitive so that the programs would not be able to run in the buildings. So at some point in time in the past, you know, this revenue of about $10,000 per site if they're in a year-round program, or about $8,000 if they only operate, because we have a few programs that only operate during the school year, was arrived at. And it's a fee that's generated that the organization using the building can afford to pay for the space, and also obviously benefits the school by them being able to use that funding in the past to pay for student-related activities for their kids, because their kids were impacted by the program operating out of their school. So it is a fee. It's a program fee in lieu of really following the use of facility policy that would outline the charges for the building space and custodial fees and things of that sort.
Ms. Scott?
And other groups that use our space for other programs, does that fee go back to the school as well, or does that go to the facility charges?
These are the only fees that actually, under this arrangement, go back to the schools themselves. These are the only groups that are actually in the buildings like all the time and really have a partnership with that school. All of our, say like our rec league basketball and things, we actually waive the fees because it's directly benefiting Lowell kids. So we don't charge those groups for using the buildings. As long as the activity takes place, you know, Monday through Friday when the buildings are staffed, and we don't incur any costs. We don't then pass the costs off to the youth groups. If we do have some, like AAU basketball, which is a more competitive program that would have some Lowell kids and, say, Merrimack Valley kids in them, we would charge them a fee for using a gym if they were to rent a gym. And that fee would go to the use of facility account, and it would either pay for, let's say it was a tournament, we had to bring a custodian on, we would obviously charge them for the custodial time. We would then pay the custodian out of that report. But we would also charge them a dollar amount for, say, use of the space. And we have used that money strategically over the last number of years to replace, say, bleachers in our buildings. We're doing 3 sets this year. We've replaced, like the hardwood floors if they need to be refinished in gyms. We use that fund to really maintain buildings district-wide.
Mr. Conway?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lang. This process that we're presently using, this is something that we have been doing for quite a few years, the same procedures. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I've been here, I think, 17 years, and it was going on before I got here. Dick Regling, Dr. Regling, the former assistant superintendent, I mean, he was here for 10 years prior to me. He's the one that really kind of laid it out for me. So no, this has been the practice in the school department.
So this hasn't been a change in the recent couple years or so?
No, you're talking at least 17 years since I've been here.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Ms. Rothschild?
Okay, so if I follow your line of thinking, so we don't charge some organizations because it benefits our Lowell school kids, but yet we do charge other organizations that also serve school kids. That's one point, one issue I picked up. What I see is a disparity in how we are, number one, assessing school fees for school use, and number two, I mean, I see these rental fees as funds to offset the cost of operations in our schools. For instance, I did not vote for that part-time employee for the winter, because it's in cases like these, we could have actually used those facility funds to fund that particular position. Because it's a one-time you know, it's strategic, it benefits all of our schools. So I guess this warrants, I think, further discussion in one of our subcommittees.
If I can just respond to the first part of your comment. Any group that would typically derive a revenue from their use of our buildings, we do charge for the buildings. So a partnership with like a CTI or YMCA, that organization is obviously through voucher or whatnot, they're generating a revenue for having the program in the buildings. We would charge them a fee for using the building. A nonprofit sports organization using a gym or whatnot, they're not looking to make a profit. They're only supplying the service to the Lowell kids. We wouldn't, but that's across the board. I mean, we wouldn't be selective. If we're doing that for baseball, we would do that for basketball. We typically do not charge Lowell organizations for use of Lowell schools.
Ms. Martin and then Ms. Scott.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you know, I certainly think that it might make some sense for us to have this conversation, maybe go through one of the subcommittees, whichever we choose. But I do think one of the key things is kind of that philosophical decision that we need to make. And I think that if we're doing it, we need to do it in a broader sense. You know, I would say in terms of just full disclosure, I'm an employee of Community Teamwork. I've been an employee there for over 7 years. I am not involved in this specific program, any of the childcare programming, but just, you know, to be clear. You know, one of my concerns is going to be if we are making this shift. I mean, the idea that in this case, you know, $8,100 that the YMCA is paying to the school that they live at, which is part of their partnership agreement, which is part of the, you know, to offset the additional work that happens within that school, because they are there. I think that's, in my mind, you know, again, philosophically speaking, I think that's a well-warranted investment, and it's a partnership between a community-based organization and a school that pays dividends, you know, all year round. If we're going to change philosophy, and if we're going to be looking for parity, one of the key things we're going to need to include in this conversation is PTA funds. It's going to have to include grant funding that's been directed at specific school sites. Those will need to be shared across the district. I would be really concerned if we move in this direction, it's going to need to include all of those different criteria. Because you know, there are certain schools that may have a parent group that's particularly talented in one area, a book fair, something like that. Are those the only, you know, if they're doing the work for that specific school to benefit those specific kids, if we're looking, you know, to make this change, then that would mean that the proceeds of that would be shared throughout the district. If a specific grant goes in to support a special science program at one school, well, then we need to look at that and see if the work that's happening at that school to support their specific identified needs, if that's what prompted that, then again, that's going to have to get spread throughout the district. I think when we look at school-based management and we look at that philosophy, that we need to, you know, I support the idea that schools should have the responsibility, they should have the ability and the onus to build what they need. And I think this is one of those opportunities where schools have built partnerships over many, many years, and that, you know, part of that partnership is an investment in their student activities account, that I think really helps foster, you know, new programming and different options for their students. And I think, quite honestly, they've earned it by opening up their schools and being so welcoming to these programs, which historically have had a difficult time finding a home in our district and in any district. So I think, you know, moving forward, to have a conversation, that's perfectly fine. I don't know if you want to say facilities, or I don't know, facilities would be fine to have our next conversation about this. But I do think that as we have the conversation, we need to have a much broader viewpoint on it, philosophically speaking.
Thank you. Ms. Scott.
Where to start? I would just like to start. PTO funds or PTA funds are privately raised funds. They're not funds that come through the district.
These aren't funds, philosophically speaking.
Ms. Scott has the floor.
I'm sorry.
What exactly, I guess I'm misunderstanding. The funds are facility fees. The agreement says $10,000 per school for the following facilities. the account is the facilities revolving account. What is the use that is allowed under the facilities revolving account?
I mean, it's very, it's laid out in the statute, but in general terms, it would be salaries, wages, contracted services, anything related to facility upkeep. I mean, in fairness, under my philosophy or the broader philosophy, I'm not recommend, I mean, that fund does need to be used that way. Under this, what I'm doing is saying, that's fine, use the money that goes into that fund, the $66,000 or whatnot, for facilities-related matters that are covered under the statute. What I'm saying is you have the power as a school committee to then appropriate other funds within your budget back to the student activity funds at those individual schools to basically still give them credit for housing those programs. You know, in the facilities budget, under this scenario, you know, there's now an extra, say, $60,000 just in round terms going in there for facility upkeep. We could transfer $60,000 within the local school department budget that was earmarked for facilities into student activities, which is legitimate, you know, legal, whatnot, appropriate it that way. The individual schools can then access that money for student activities as opposed to facilities. It's a way to live within the philosophy that we've been operating under for the last, you know, 20 plus years. Again, as an alternate, you know, if you don't agree with that, you could leave the money in the use facilities fund and use that for facilities needs. I just think that does bring a different set of questions that need to be answered around building use and equity and these continued partnerships.
Ms. Martin, and then Mr. Gignac.
Yeah, I'd just say to answer Ms. Scott's question, I think that, you know, as we look at fundraising that happens within all of our schools, it's important to note that different schools have different abilities in fundraising based on the economic realities that their families face. There's, you know, so if there is fundraising happening in one area that's maybe particularly more effective because they have access to, you know, a higher economic, you know, level based on their location or just based on maybe the businesses that surround them, whatever that may be. You know, recognizing that there are issues of parity there, and that if we're going to change the philosophy with which we do this work, then we need to do that across the board. I'd also say that any activity that's relying on the 501c3 number, on the nonprofit status of our school district, is money that's coming in through the district. So, you know, I think PTAs don't operate as independent entities. When they have, that's when we've ended up with people going to, you know, having court issues. So there's a very specific reason why we brought our PTAs onto a more level playing field and you know, brought those monies in so that there weren't independent bank accounts that were spread throughout this city with, you know, individual signers that we knew nothing about. So there's a reason that we professionalized that whole activity. So I do think that that's gonna, I think having the conversation is absolutely warranted. I just want to make sure that if we have the conversation, we're having a fully fledged conversation and we're not singling out specific fundraising to be held sacrosanct while others are being, you know, discussed.
Mr. Gignac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really understand why we're discussing this in the first place. I don't think there's any legal issue here, so I'm not really sure why it was needed that the deputy superintendent would meet with the city auditor and city solicitor. However, I can see that there is much discussion to take place, so I would like to make a motion to refer this discussion to the next facilities subcommittee, if that's okay with the chair. Second. Okay, thank you.
Motion by Mr. Gignac to refer this report to the Facilities Subcommittee, seconded by Mr. Leary. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have, under new business, job description for the STEM Idea Labs. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have here a memo from Assistant Superintendent Claire Abrams, who is requesting positions to assist with the STEM Academy Idea Labs that are taking place at the Rogers School and the Robinson Middle Schools. And so as the work has evolved over time, there has been use of UMass Lowell students, and there also has been techs, tutors, high school students who have worked in collaboration with the technology labs. And so this request is asking for 3 attached job descriptions. And they will all be funded through the Gelfand Family Trust, which is the funding source that is doing the financial portion of the new labs that we've added. So if we look forward, the program assistants, the program assistant is a student almost always from UMass Lowell, who is pursuing a bachelor's degree in science, math, or engineering, and they have worked in the past in programs like this, but they have the content experiential piece, and of course, it follows all of the guidelines of our school district, our own queries, all that. So this is a request for a person, college student, to be paid a $14 per hour salary to be assisting in the after-school programming, and it could morph into summer programming. As you know, we're going to run those programs. So that's the first one. The second one is for after-school assistants, so 2 after-school students. And so for our promising young people who have strong academic records in science and mathematics courses, we've, in the work of Mr. Prime, he's used students who he knew younger and then just went into high school that have been with him in his camps over time. So this is a request for a job description that says $8 per hour for a high school student that has working papers and all of the legal pieces we need to have in place. Again, funded through the Gelfand Family Trust Foundation. And the last piece is more of an instructional piece. So this is an instructional piece that will meet the needs depending on the qualification of who we hire. Could be a public school teacher, because we are training our own teachers, science teachers who are interested in being part of this. We're training everybody, but these are people who are ready to step up right now in the engineering range. So this will be to run an after-school video game programming camp, yay. And so here we go. It could be $30 an hour for those particular people who are our employees, that's the teacher rate, or $14 an hour if in fact it might be a college student who could run this. And so it's opening up our hiring practices to another realm, but it is including that piece for our high school students, because they're kind of doing the prep work, getting the lab up to speed, whatnot. And if it's professional, of course, we'll go with our own contractual rate. So for your review and approval, or any questions?
Mr. Gignac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to express my true sincerest thanks to Mr. Prime and his connections in Ms. Abrams' office, because this is just, the fact that this stuff has taken off so quickly is truly amazing, because everything else in this system seems to drag. And it was great to read about it in the paper on how excited that the students are, and the fact that the Gelfand Family Trust are picking up the tab is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'd entertain a motion to then approve the job description of the program assistant for the STEM lab. So moved by Mr. Leary, seconded by Ms. Rosikowicz. Roll call, please.
Ms. Rosikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
I then entertain a motion for the after-school lab assistant and tutor positions. So moved by Mr. Gignac, seconded by Mr. Conway. Roll call, please.
Ms. Rosikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Then entertain a motion for the job descriptions of after-school video game programming instructors for 2. So moved by Mr. Gignac, seconded by Mr. Leary. Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Thank you. Next, we have, excuse me, is it the end of the report? Madam Superintendent? Yes, okay. Next, we have ratification of the agreement with the building service employees. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next 2 items, first being the ratification of the agreement of the revised contract language and the separation agreement with the custodians that you have reviewed in the past, so for your approval.
Thank you. Any discussion? Entertain a motion to approve by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Ross Sikowicz. Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes,
7 yeas, approved.
that's Mr. Thank you. Next, we have the ratification of the agreement with the cafeteria employees.
Thank you,
Move for
Mayor
approval by
Murphy.
Mr. Excuse me, Madam Superintendent.
Sorry. Thank you. This is the approval again for the revised contract language and the separation agreement for the cafeteria workers for your review and approval.
Motion to approve by Mr. Gignac, seconded by Mr. Leary. Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? Mayor Murphy?
Yes,
7 yeas, approved.
thank you. Next, we have convention and conference request. Motion to take all 5 requests together by Mr. Conway, seconded by Ms. Scott. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Motion to approve by Ms. Ross Sikowicz, seconded by Ms. Scott. Roll call, please.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Gignac?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Today, a motion to adjourn by Ms. Martin, seconded by Mr. Leary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. We stand adjourned.